From Brandeis University, welcome to Recall This Book, where we assemble scholars and writers from different disciplines to make sense of contemporary issues, problems, and events. Specifically, welcome to Recall This B-Side, a short series of conversations that we undertook as a companion piece to B-Side Books, an edited collection out from Columbia University Press this June. So, what exactly is a B-side book? Well, it's a work that was unjustly kicked to the curb, thrown prematurely onto the ash heap of history. So basically, Elizabeth and I thought it would be fun to invite a few of the B-side authors on to talk about their choices and also sort of talk around their choices about what lay beneath them. So today's guest is the wonderful novelist and New Yorker writer, Caleb Crain, who's also a wonderful friend, but you don't need to know that. I love both his novels, Necessary Errors and Overthrow, with a special fondness for the former because it depicts a world that he and I both lived through and in. So that of young American expatriates in Czechoslovakia just after the fall of the Berlin Wall. So I basically just have three main questions for you, though I'm sure we'll also go down some byways. So the first is just what is your B-side and why did you choose it?
Sure. The B-side is The Young Visitors by Daisy Ashford, which is a comic novel written when the author was 9.
Which itself is comic, yeah.
Itself is comic. So it was a little bit of a stunt book. I think it was published in 1918, 1919? No, 1919. But I chose it just because it's actually really funny. And not funny, like I feel like when you hear, a child wrote a book, like you think, the humor is going to be like, haha, she misspelled a word, or she said something she didn't really understand the meaning of. But it's actually funny because she gets more than you realize a child can get about how society works. And you're actually laughing with her, not at her, because she actually skewers adults in this completely thorough, ruthless, merciless way. So that's it. It's a completely implausible story about a 43-year-old man who's living with a 17-year-old girl, and they both are social climbers. The girl gets an invitation to London, and then the older man, Mr. Saltina, basically sort of scurries after her and tries to make himself into a gentleman. In this sort of weird educational finishing school that Daisy Ashford at age 9 imagines is located in the Crystal Palace. I'll just read the first sentence because I don't have a...
That sounds great.
Mr. Saltina was an elderly man of 42 and was fond of asking people to stay with him. He had quite a young girl staying with him of 17 named Ethel Montague. Mr. Saltina had dark short hair and mustache and whiskers, which were very black and twisty. He was middle-sized and he had very pale blue eyes. He had a pale brown suit, but on Sundays he had a black one, and he had a topper every day, as he thought it or becoming.
Yeah.
Anyway, so it's just like an elderly man of 42, basically, is where you know that you're in good hands.
Yeah, I totally agree. Do you have a fondness for books written by children, or?
No, I wouldn't say that. I don't think there's any other books written by children that I've even read, but I do love novels that are kind of in a talked voice that are like Gentlemen Prefer Blondes, for example.
Oh my God, that's such a good example. Because I was thinking of Notes from Underground, just like the dark dyspeptic version of that. But Gentlemen Prefer Blondes. Wow, I'm completely with you. I'm fascinated. She's an amazing writer.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's amazing.
Yeah,
and I think, or like Flann O'Brien, like The Third Policeman.
Yeah,
like it just sounds like somebody's telling you the story, rather than, I love Henry James, but it doesn't sound like he's in the room telling me the story.
Right. So wait, so back to Ashford herself. Any thoughts on like not being able to catch lightning in a bottle twice? I mean, if she could do it as a 9-year-old, why couldn't she do it as a 40-year-old or a 50-year-old? Or
well, she wrote like 5 or 6 novels when she was a kid.
Yeah.
And they all ended up getting reprinted after this one was a big hit. But this is really the best one. This is really the others are okay. But this is really, I think it's just like, I don't know. I sort of think adult novelists are subject to the same kind of luck. Like
Hmm.
you just write them. You don't actually know if they're going to be any good or if they're going to catch on.
Yeah.
That's separate. You don't control that.
Yeah.
Um,
Did you write a novel when you were 9, Caleb? If it's not too
I
personal a question.
no, I was 9. No, well, when I was actually maybe I did. I don't. How old was I? I grew up. I was born in Texas, and we lived there until I was 6, and then we moved to California when I was like 7 or 8.
Hmm.
Uh, it was like, you know, my whole world was destroyed, my whole like life, and so I wrote about it. I wrote like a little, like made a little book of like our driving trip from Texas to California.
Wow.
Um,
Yeah.
that was kind of my way of dealing with this loss. So maybe that is where the impulse to write novels comes from with me. I don't know.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, so can I ask how you think about the concept of the B-side? Like I was thinking of different words to describe it. I was thinking about recovery, rediscovery, reformulation. I mean, what does it mean to you? Like what was the appeal to you of the concept?
Okay, so here I'll confess something. So like as a reviewer, I get sent a lot of books
Uh-huh.
and often more books than I can possibly read. And you're sort of like, you'll salt them away and you'll be kind of like, and years later, you're just like, okay, I have to throw out these. I can't keep all of these. And
Yeah.
some of them, you just pick them up and you look and you're like, yeah, I was right never to read this. It's clear. You just know as you pick it up that you didn't need to read it and it was fine that you didn't. Then there are other books you pick up and you're like, oh, I really should have read this. And you just like know years later, you look at it and you just know, like, do you know what I mean? Uh,
Yeah. Yeah,
uh,
totally.
Clearer because like all the dross has kind of fallen away and you're just like,
Yeah.
oh,
And I also just like the image of, well, okay, so there's a moment inside Jane Eyre that I like, but I also was going to say that I just love the image of Charlotte Bronte sending it off to publishers. It would get rejected. She would cross out the address of the one publisher, write a different publisher address on it, send it off again. Like I love the durability of that. And then the moment inside Jane Eyre that I also love is the moment where you know, she's asked, what must you do to avoid going to hell? And she says, oh, I just must not die. I just think like, so in other words, she's not going to play by
yeah,
their rules, but she's still going to win simply by not dying. And I thought, yeah, I mean, there's just
yeah,
something to be said for books that don't die, like that.
yeah. And for authors who don't die, I think,
Yeah, no, I completely agree. Doris Lessing. I
you
mean,
just have to keep going. Yeah.
yeah, 65 years. Ursula Le Guin. And I think a lot of Ursula Le Guin went through patches of a decade or more where she wrote nothing that is worth rereading. And then something else comes out. Another Ursi book suddenly appears in 1998. What the hell? Yeah. Okay, so Caleb, we already kind of covered this question of if folks like The Young Visitors, what else might they like? Because you talked about these other great novels with voices.
Sure.
Um, but do you have other thoughts like that? Like if this
Yeah.
appeals?
Like I was thinking about that. Like I feel like I read a novel by Barbara Comans a couple of years ago called Our Spoons Came from
Oh
Woolworths.
God, I love her.
And
Yes.
I
Yeah,
feel like it's also like it just sounds like she's talking to you. Um,
totally. Yeah.
and
I've been trying to get Steve McCauley to write a B-side about her, actually. I think she's
oh yeah, that would be great. Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah. And he, as a comic novelist, would totally
Yeah. Yeah.
get that. Somebody like Jean Reese,
Uh-huh.
not the Sargasso Sea, but the early ones where it's sort of
Yeah.
depressed young women.
Yeah.
Uh, in
Good morning, midnight or something.
Good Morning, Midnight, and
In the
yeah,
Paris.
after leaving Mr. Mackenzie.
After leaving Mr. Mackenzie, right? Yeah.
Those are also kind of talked. Like
Yeah.
it's very much carried by her voice.
Yeah.
And it wouldn't quite work if it were in a third person omniscient
That's great. Yeah.
degree zero voice.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then I mean the other things I thought were like there's this British publishing house, feminist British publishing house, Persephone Books, that reprints sort of overlooked classics, and
Yeah.
they have a couple of comic novels in their repertoire. Most of them are fairly serious, but there's one called Miss Pettigrew Lives for a Day by someone
Yeah.
named Winifred Watson, which is just totally charming. It's not a talked novel in the same way, but it's totally that kind of British ironic humor that can't really be reproduced by other nationalities
Yeah.
for some reason. Yeah.
So we'll put a list of all of these up, but it's funny because Steve McCauley recommended that to me as well.
Oh,
I
really?
still haven't read it yet, but I
Oh, you
had a
can read it
shock.
in like two
Yeah,
and a half hours. I mean,
that's
it's like
awesome.
totally charming and just hilarious. And yeah.
Oh my God. Well, Caleb, thank you so much. And I will just conclude by saying, of course, we hope that you will go off and read The Young Visitors, and also that you'll buy the B-Sides book from that's Columbia University Press. Agents are standing by. But whether you do or not, we'd love to know your own thoughts about what makes for a great B-side. I think every listener, I imagine, has a book or two or three that they would love to dredge out of the depths and become, as Hannah Arendt said, a diver of pearls. So tweet at us, send us an email, let us know. We want to know. We want to know your own B-side. So Caleb, thank you so much for coming on today. It just remains for me to tell you really quickly that Recall This Book is sponsored by the Mandel Humanities Center. Music comes from Eric Chaslow and Barbara Cassidy. Sound editing by Naomi Cohen. Website design and social media by Nai Kim. And if you enjoyed today's show, tell your friends about us, write or review us on iTunes, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcast. It's the single most important way that word gets around for a modest, scholarly podcast like this one. And check out our other Recall This B-side episodes, among them Pardis Debashi on a ridiculously silly Iranian novel, Merve Emre on a much more serious Italian novel, and RTB's own Elizabeth Ferry. So from all of us here at Recall This Book, thanks for listening.